Hello, everybody. I do apologize for keeping you all waiting for what I think is going to be a very exciting afternoon in pageant. I am Lynn Innes. I'm Emeritus Professor of Postcolonial Literatures at the University of Kent, and also the author of The Last Prince of Bengal, a book about the Nawab of Bengal and his descendants. After launching their new publication, Selective Inclusion, African and Asian Celebrities in London's Vanity Fair magazine, on the 8th of December, today's Vanity Fair pageant via Zoom is sadly one of the South Asian Cinema Foundation's final events for this special heritage project. Today, you will be introduced to 17 African and Asian celebrities from the period between 1868 to 1914. The very first of today's personalities is none other than my own great-grandfather, Nawab Mansur Ali Khan, who was featured in Vanity Fair soon after he came to England in 1869, and just 1 year before he married my great-grandmother, Sarah Vanell, who was a chambermaid in the hotel where he was staying. His role is being performed by Lalit Mohan Joshi. Lalit is the South Asian Cinema Foundation's director and coordinator of its current heritage project, funded by the Heritage Lottery Fund. So now let's look forward to the pageant.
Thank you. आदाब अर्ज करता हूं। मैं जानता हूं आप वैनिटी फेयर में छपे मेरे उस वाहियात कार्टून को देख रहे हैं, है ना? सख्त नफरत है मुझे उससे। But look at the irony. Instead of apologizing to me for that stupid cartoon of mine in Vanity Fair, I'm told it is supposed to be an honor to even appear in one of these Vanity Fair cartoons. That's what my secretary, Henry Fox, tried to tell me. Look who else has been so honored, he said. Benjamin Disraeli, the Pope, the King of Italy, William Gladstone, Lord Dufferin, only the most important people, he said. That may be true, I told him. But these people were treated with more respect. See how Prince Tech is portrayed just 4 weeks after I appear. Handsome, upright, riding a magnificent horse, and described as the most popular of princes. I too am a very good horseman. Crowds come to look at me and cheer me when I take a ride in Hyde Park with my sons. And my lovely wife, Sarah, who says, I am still handsome. Just look at the portraits of me in my palace in Murshidabad. And who is this Prince Tech? A mere count with no money, from a small prince in Austria, famous because he marries an English princess? But I was the ruler of the 3 greatest and richest provinces of East India, Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. And it was I who made my wives princesses. And yet, show me as small and feeble, like an old grandfather in those great big spectacles. It is true that Vanity Fair supported my cause and declared how unjustly I was treated. A living monument of English injustice, they called me. I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful to that many good Englishmen and Irishmen gave me their support and voted me in Parliament. But the British government tricked. They thanked me for all the support I gave them when many of my fellow countrymen wanted to drive them out in 1857. And the Queen herself promised that I would retain all my rights and privileges. That was all I wanted. For the sake of my father, who died when I was only 8, and for the sake of my sons, I wished only to preserve the honor and glory of my royal family. And I was always loyal to the dear Queen, who welcomed me when I came to England. आप ही बताइए, मीर जाफर से लेकर आज तक हमारे पुरखों ने ब्रितानी हुकूमत के लिए क्या नहीं किया। हमारे खुलूस, हमारी मेहमान नवाजी की मिसालें दी जाती हैं, पर बर्तानिया ने, मल्लिका विक्टोरिया ने इसका क्या सिला दिया? First, they took away most of the pension they promised my ancestors and refused to listen to my case in restoration. Then their agent in Murshidabad stole my money and many of the palace jewels. This was the agent who was supposed to take care of my interests while I was still in my teens. Well, he certainly did take care and hid my money away so carefully that I never saw it again. When I complained to Lord Dalhousie, he refused to listen. That is why I came to England in 1869 to petition the Queen and Parliament for my money and my rights. But alas, it did no good. The British tricked me out of my land, my title, and most of my money. And so I'm the last Nawab Nazim of Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. My son and his descendants will be merely the Nawabs of Murshidabad. I failed them. बड़े चालबाज निकले ये अंग्रेज, आप भी जरा होशियार रहिएगा। खुदा। So thank you very much for appreciating me, ladies and gentlemen. Our next celebrity who appeared in Vanity Fair on 26th of August, 1897 is Prince Ranjit Sinhji. We all know about Ranji Trophy in India, 1872 to 1933. He was in this world from the state of Navanagar in Gujarat. So please welcome Bhaskar Patel, who will play the role of Ranjit Sinhji for us today. Like Ranji, Bhaskar hails from Gujarat and loves cricket. A professional jobbing actor on stage, television and radio, and feature films in UK and Europe. Bhaskar has been an old friend and has been acting ever since 1980. He admits it was his love of old black and white Hindi films like mine that drew him towards both cinema and theatre. Bhaskar, it's you.
Yes, here we are, Ranjit Sinhji. I have had a good life, if I'm allowed to blow my own trumpet. I'd say I was the first Indian to play Test cricket. In fact, it was early days for cricket itself. I'd also like to add that in my first Test match, I got a century against the Australians. Not bad, eh? That was way back in 1896. Actually, when I first sailed to London in 1888, I was only 16. I had come with my college principal, Mr. McNaughton, and his wife. I was far more interested in tennis than in cricket. It was, of course, exciting to accompany McNaughton to London's Oval, where I shook hands with famous players of those days. And yes, who do you think came to meet me? While I was in London, armed with a letter of introduction. Can you guess? Give up? Okay, I'll tell you. It was none other than the young Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, a fellow Gujarati from Rajkot. As you might know, after being called to the bar and a stint in Africa, he became a prominent leader of the Indian National Congress. Now returning to cricket, I must tell you that some British high-ups who determined the selection of players in Test cricket in my days used to discriminate against outsiders like me. Would you believe we were called birds of passage? But the English crowd just loved me. My first biographer, Roland Ward, wrote in 1934, how they jumped to their feet at the mere sight of me coming down the pavilion steps, trailing my bat. I even played for the Sussex county side until I was 48, despite losing an eye in a tiresome shooting accident. I love living in and visiting England. I have some very special friends here and yes, in Ireland too. I fell so deeply in love with Ballynahinch Castle that I ended up buying it. But I love India and I have had the good fortune to rule Navanagar over in Gujarat since 1907. Actually, my becoming the Maharaja of this princely state in Kathiawar is a fascinating story. I was adopted in 1879 at the age of 7 by Vibhaji, the childless ruler of Navanagar, as his son and heir. But in 1884, my adopted father suddenly dispossessed me, determined to foist the claims of a son through a woman in his harem. He claimed he was the child of his legally wedded wife. The British agreed with him, and my claim to the throne was therefore set aside. I had no choice and had to accept my loss. But suddenly the wheel of fortune turned in my favor. Death removed the boy whose appointment had stripped off my position and enabled me to ascend to the throne in 1907. I was chosen to represent my fellow Indian princes at the League of Nations. So I'm much more than a sportsman. The picture that fellow Vanity Fair's Leslie Ward, who signed himself as spy, drew of me when he tracked me down at the Sussex County Ground is not at all bad. He shows me going out to bat with my trusty bat and silk shirt. I was fascinating. I was focusing on the game, and I was focusing on the game, and he catches my look of concentration pretty well. It reminds me of when I went out to face the Australian fast bowlers all those years ago. Like I did long ago, we Indians have undoubtedly proved that we can be as good as anyone under the sun with determination, hard work, and pluck. Thank you.
Great. Wow. Thank you so much, Bhaskar. It feels that you are Ranjit Sinhji, not Bhaskar Patel. Thank you so much. So we have to go ahead now. Now we come to a great legend, Sir Syed Ahmad Khan. I'm sure most of you may be knowing him. He obviously wasn't included in Vanity Fair, though he was no less a celebrity than many of those who were. So instead of telling you about Sir Syed's eventful life and achievements, let me stop here and request Atul Tiwari to take on the mantle. Atul Tiwari is an established screenwriter, an old friend, and actor from Bombay Films. He has been with my mentor, Shyam Benegal, for donkey's years, ever since Discovery of India. And of course, he's known for his role in Three Idiots, Mission Kashmir, and PK. And Atul Tiwari is joining us despite all his engagements from Bangladesh, where Shyam Benegal Sahab is shooting a feature film on Mujibur Rahman. So I'll straight away go to Atul Tiwari. Atul Tiwari ji, aapka khair maqdam.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
I am Syed Ahmad Takhwi bin Syed Muhammad Muttaqi. But I'm sure you know me as Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, KCSI-LLT. Friends, I was born way back in 1817 in the capital of the Mughal Empire, Delhi, during the era of the Emperor Akbar Shah II. It was Akbar Shah II who had sent Raja Ram Mohan Roy to London, who later fought against the cruel sati tradition of Hindus in India. My father was from a family of Mansabdar of the Mughals, and my mother was the beloved daughter of a Wazir of the Mughal Empire. with the theological education that I received at the house of the Mughals, and as against the theological, the logical and scientific education and the scientific temper that I got from mother made me later in my life whatever I could become. I admit I wasn't a Maharaja like Sayaji Rao III of Baroda, or Rapendra Narayan Bhoop Bahadur of Kuch Bihar, or Rajen Singhji of Patiala. I wasn't a London-based barrister and member of the parliament like Sir Bhavnagre, nor a sports legend like Indian prince and star cricket Ranjit Singhji of Nawab. But as far as the social circuit of London was concerned, I certainly was no less than any of them. But looking back, I wonder why Vanity Fair didn't feature me. Did they not know that I served the East India Company loyally in many positions for many, many years? But yes, when the push came to a shove in 1857, despite my allegiances to the British, I could not but speak the truth in my Asbab-e-Baghawat-e-Hind, or the causes of the Indian mutiny. I criticized the company for its wrongdoings, and I printed 500 copies and sent them to the company itself, despite the warnings by my friends, and of course, to the British government in London. After all, the first lesson that I learned in my English sessions was honesty is the best policy. Maybe the editor of the Vanity Fair did not know that I had established schools in Muradabad, in Ghazipur, and yes, the Mohammedan Anglo-Oriental College in Aligarh. I had become a subordinate judge in my young life and worked hard to push Indian Muslims out of their position of general backwardness and ignorance towards education and progress and light. And that needed a scientific temper, and a lot of reforms in the rigid stand of the Muslims of my time. For this reason, I had founded a journal called the Mohammedan Social Reform. Yet, Thomas Gibson Bowles, the famous editor of Vanity Fair, did not feature me. Like he featured Sir Salar Jung, the Prime Minister of Hyderabad, who appeared in the Vanity Fair in 1876. Perhaps poor Mr. Bowles had not heard of my senior friends like Mirza Lalit and Zok. And of course, he did not know the fact that Mirza Ghalib, the great Urdu poet, had written the foreword of my illustrated re-rendering of Abul Fazl's Ayn-e Akbari. Because of my attempts to awaken the backward Muslims and spending time to uplift the Muslims, some people started calling me anti-Hindu. But did the fools know that I was one of the biggest champions and advocate of the Hindu-Muslim unity? And with Raja Shiv Pratap of Banaras, I had established a united patriotic association. When I found a chance in 1869 to visit the country of my favorite philosopher and economist, John Stuart Mill, I was so enamored by Cambridge University that I wanted to make one in India. And that's how the foundation of Mohammedan Anglo-Oriental College was laid. Mind you, I did not call it Anglo-Islamic. I called it Anglo-Oriental. because students from all denominations were welcomed to my college. That's the college that now is called Aligarh Muslim University. I'm sure you have heard of it. And the Aligarians, the students who come out of it. Sometimes I wish that those who accuse me of being the father of the two nation theory had read what I wrote a long time ago. Let me quote it. Even at the cost of sounding little conceited, let me quote myself today to you. I said a long time back, "Oh Hindus and Muslims, do you belong to a country other than India? Don't you live on the soil that you are buried in the same soil, that you are cremated on the ghats of this country? And if you have lived here, if you are buried here, if you have been cremated here, then bear in mind that Hindu and Muslim is but a religious word. And all Hindus and Muslims and Christians and Sikhs who live in this country are one nation." Perhaps Mr. Bowles, the editor of Vanity Fair, had heard or read this piece of mine. And that's why he did not feature me on the cover of his glossy magazine. Friends, it didn't bother me then. It doesn't bother me now. I'm just telling you this, for I've been invited to say a few words about myself and this fashionable British magazine of the Victorian times. Nevertheless, the British made me a KCSI, Knight Commander of Star of India. But more than that, much before the British honored me, it was the last Mughal emperor, Bahadur Shah Zafar, who gave me the title of Arif-e-Jung. Arif-e-Jung means the wise, mystic warrior. That was much more satisfying than my caricature being featured on the cover of Vanity Fair. Anyway, shukriya that you heard me and my story for such a long time. There are so many Indians who had been to London, who had been to England, and who made a difference to both the countries. I wish them all, I meet them all, I learn from them all, and sometimes I get to exchange a few ideas with them all. Hopefully, this little exchange will help all of them. Shukriya, adab.
बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया, आदाब सैयद साहब, Mansur Ali Khan खुश हुआ. Thank you very much. I would like to mention here, I welcome all the SACF volunteers, academics, and also counselors who are here. I would like to mention Prabhakar Kaza is here. So welcome to this event, and this is our final event. Welcome. I would like to now I would like to go to Cornelia Sorabji, another legendary character from our project. Like us, before that, I would like to mention, maybe it is good to say that you may be wondering that all these words and ideas that are being narrated here, they are based on research, most of the research done by Kusum, and also inputs from those people who are enacting it. My personal monologue was thankfully done by Lynn Ince, who is who's from the family of Mansur Ali Khan. So this is imagined, but a realistic portrayal as if it's a film script. So let me go ahead with that. I just wanted to mention that. Like Sayyid Cornelia despite her distinguished and pioneering role in society, was not featured Vanity Fair, because we are also taking those who are excluded, also who are included. So I now invite who other than our friend Mamta Gupta to enlighten us about her life, times, and achievements by herself being Cornelia Sorabji. Let me add that Mamta Gupta is a trained actor from India's prestigious National School of Drama. After working in All India Radio Delhi, Mamta distinguished herself equally as a broadcast journalist in the Hindi section of the BBC World Service, and we have been colleagues. Please welcome Mamta Gupta as Cornelia Sorabji.
Greetings to you all. I, Cornelia Sorabji, was born in the Bombay Presidency in 1866. I was brought up as a Christian by my father, a Parsi convert to Christianity, and my mother, a South Indian who had been adopted and brought up by Christian missionaries. After graduating from Bombay University, I managed to raise funds to travel to England for further studies between 1889 and 1893. I was the first woman to study for a law degree at Oxford University and also trained as a solicitor in London. But I lived in an age when there was severe discrimination against women, both in India and in Britain. For example, although I passed the Bachelor of Civil Law examination at Oxford, I was not awarded my degree until after the First World War. Can you imagine? When women started being given law degrees. Similarly, though I completed a pupillage at Lincoln's Inn in the 1800s, it was decades later, when I was 55 years old, that I was called to the English bar in 1923. When I first came to Britain in 1889, I was warmly welcomed by prominent British men and women. They included the Master of Balliol College, Benjamin Jewett, and Elizabeth Manning, Secretary of the Indian Association. They also introduced me to the members of British upper classes. After returning to India in 1893, I started working as a lawyer, but was later stopped because I was a woman. In 1904, the British appointed me Lady Assistant to the Court of Wards. I began advising secluded Parda Nasheen women about their landed estates. After years of splendid service, I retired from this post in 1922. It gladdened me a bit when the Sex Disqualification Removal Act of 1919 gave me the right to work as a vakil or lawyer in India. When the Legal Practitioners Women Act 1923 was enacted, I was also able to practice at the Calcutta Bar and advise and represent Parda Nasheen and other clients. But there were still many challenges. I was initially excluded from the bar library. Can you imagine? I found it difficult to obtain briefs, and I was looked down upon simply because I was female. Despite discrimination and prejudices, I persevered in my legal work. In addition to practicing as a lawyer, I wrote and published 9 books. These included Parda Nasheen, Love and Life Behind the Parda in the 1901, and Parda Nasheen in 1917. I also wrote 2 autobiographical works, India Calling in 1934 and India Recall in 1936. I remained a staunch supporter of the British Raj. In the 1930s, I moved permanently to Britain. I lived through the terrible London bombings during the Second World War. Then I passed away in my Finsbury Park home in 1954, just before I turned 88. I'm happy that after suffering a kind of temporary eclipse from public memory, I am resurfacing. This is evident from the reassessments of my pioneering spirit and my contribution to the cause of women by various scholars and the numerous books on me that have been published in recent years. Though Vanity Fair seemed to ignore me and my achievements, I thank SACF for inviting me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mamta ji, for that impressive Cornelia Sorabji mantle that you took. And we really felt you were Cornelia Sorabji. So now we move on from India to the Far East. Let's welcome Kuo Sung-tao from China, who appeared in Vanity Fair magazine in 1877. Our Kuo Sung-tao today is Lalit from Lucknow, the city of the Nawab Awad, named after Lakshman, brother of Ram. Lalit is a professional theatre actor. He is also a writer, director, and teacher at the Theatre Education and Media. He was trained in acting by Raj Bisaria, an outstanding theatre pioneer who was decorated with prestigious Padma Shri Award in recent years. When Kuo Sung-tao was in England in 1870s, interpreters were used to communicate whenever he had to communicate with English people, obviously. Lalit Pokharia will talk to us in Hindi, but instead of an interpreter, please look at the chat box for a rough translation of his speech that he'll be making that I put on the chat box. But he will do justice if he enacts that role in Hindi. Lalit ji, स्वागत है आपका.
थैंक यू. मैं हूं चीन का एक नामी विद्वान और राजनयिक कुओ सुंगताओ. मैं चीन का राजदूत के रूप में सबसे पहले 1877 में लंदन आया. तब मेरा उम्र 59 साल का था. मैं लंदन में 3 बरस रहा. उन दिनों ब्रिटेन का सरकार चीन का सरकार से बहुत नाराज थी, बहुत नाराज. चीन का सरकार का विचार था कि उसका पश्चिमी देशों के साथ में किसी भी तरह का राजनीतिक संबंध होने का कोई जरूरत नहीं है. हुआ क्या था, 1875 में चीन का कुछ लोगों ने एक बड़ा अंग्रेज अफसर ऑगस्टस हेनरी मार्गरी का खून कर दिया था, हत्या कर दिया था. इस पर ब्रिटेन का सरकार चीन पर बहुत नाराज हुआ. वो चाहता था कि चीन इसके लिए माफी मांगे, और ये माफी मांगने का जो बहुत क्या बोलेंगे अप्रिय काम के लिए मुझको ब्रिटेन भेजा गया. तो साउथहैम्पटन होते हुए लंदन पहुंचने पर मुझको मेरी पत्नी को सेंट्रल लंदन में 49 क्या बोलेंगे 49 पोर्टलैंड स्ट्रीट का बहुत बड़ा कई मंजिल का बिल्डिंग में ठहराया. उसी जगह पर आज भी चीन का एम्बेसी है. लंदन पहुंचने का कुछ समय बाद वहां का मशहूर पंच मैगजीन में मेरा खिल्ली उड़ाने के लिए, मजाक उड़ाने के लिए बहुत खराब कार्टून छापा. उसमें मुझको एक छोटा बंदर जैसा दिखाता है, छोटा बंदर, और मेरा पीठ में जो बाल का चोटी है उसको सांप जैसा दिखाता, बाल का चोटी को सांप जैसा दिखाता. और ब्रिटेन के शेर के पंजे में बंदर यानी मैं बैठा है और क्या उसको दूरबीन से देख रहा है. ऐसा मजाक उड़ाता. और मेरा पत्नी का, मेरा वाइफ का भी उस मैगजीन में कविता लिखकर मजाक उड़ाया. उनको क्या बोला, वो लड़खड़ाता हुआ लिली का फूल बोल देता है. ऐसा है कि चीन में महिलाओं का पैर बहुत छोटा होता है, वहाँ ऐसा मानना है छोटा पैर बहुत खूबसूरत होता है, तो वहाँ चीन का महिला बचपन से ही पैरों को बांध के रख देता है, तो पैर छोटा हो जाता है। एनीवे, तो लंदन पहुंचने के बाद मेरा सबसे पहला महत्वपूर्ण काम था महारानी विक्टोरिया से मिलने के लिए बर्किंघम पैलेस जाना। जून 1877 1877 में वैनिटी फेयर मैगजीन में मेरा ऊपर में एक लेख और कार्टून छपता है। एक कार्टून ठीक ठाक था, मुझको खराब नहीं लगा। उसमें क्या है कि मेरे को खूब मुस्कुराता हुआ खुश खुश दिखता है, तो मैं अच्छा लगता है। ठीक है, तो लंदन में रहते हुए मैं दूसरा जगह में भी गया। मुझको याद पड़ता है कि मैं अपना साथियों के साथ में चैथम गया। चैथम, वहां हमने चाइनीज गोल्डन नाम का मशहूर अंग्रेज अफसर का बड़ा सा तस्वीर देखा। उसका ठीक 2 साल बाद में, उसको क्या बोलेंगे, 1879 1879 में, मुझे याद आ रहा, मैं हेस्बेरी गार्डन्स नाम का बहुत शानदार बगीचा देखने इटली में भी गया। वहां जाने का अवसर मिला और उसका एंट्री गेट पर, प्रवेश द्वार पर मैंने चीनी भाषा में खुशी गुदवा दिया। मुझे बहुत खुशी हुई। तो चीन लौटने से पहले एक बार दोबारा महारानी विक्टोरिया से मिलने के लिए हम दोनों आइल ऑफ वाइट गया, ऑसबोर्न हाउस में गया। महारानी को हमसे बातचीत करने के लिए दुभाषिया का सहायता लिया महारानी, क्योंकि हम अंग्रेजी नहीं बोलते थे। तो अपना देश चीन के लिए योगदान के लिए मेरा ये दर्शाना था कि चीन को पश्चिमी देशों में अब राजदूत बनाना या दूतावास बनाना बहुत सख्त जरूरत है। तो चीन में जाकर मैंने अपना देश के लिए रेलगाड़ी और दूसरा विकास का काम का बहुत पहल किया, मगर ये बात कुछ रूढ़िवादी देशवासी को बहुत गुस्सा आया। वो मुझसे बहुत नाराज हो गया। मेरे को जान का खतरा पैदा हो गया, तो मैं बहुत दूर शहर छोड़कर मैं बहुत दूर चला गया। और तो मैंने अपने जीवन का बाकी जो दिन था वो एक लेखक के रूप में और एक अध्यापक के रूप में बिताया। अब आया 1891, क्या बोलेंगे, 1891, 73 बरस का उम्र में मैं इस संसार से विदा हो गया। That's all, sir.
Thank you very much, Lalit, for your wonderful performance. I could not unmute myself, which is, we have been using Zoom for donkey's years now, 1 or 2 years, but we forget to unmute ourselves.
Okay.
बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया आपको, आपके बहुत अच्छे परफॉर्मेंस के लिए। मैं कहना चाहूंगा कि SACF thanks Heritage Lottery and lottery players for funding this wonderful project that we have been carrying on for the last 1.5 years. We have produced a book and we have produced a documentary and events like this. So now, from the first Chinese ambassador to the court of St. James, let's move to the first exponent of Hinduism in the West. You can guess it, Swami Vivekananda. Of course, he too was not included in Vanity Fair because he was neither a Maharaja nor an emperor, nor powerful statesman or supporter of the British Raj, nor a sportsman like Ranjit Sinhji, or a barrister or an MP. Before becoming an ascetic, Swami Vivekananda was called Narendranath Dutt. Born in 1863, he graduated from Calcutta University. After getting to know about Ramakrishna Paramahans, a pious Hindu mystic of Calcutta, he became his disciple and became an ascetic. After the death of his spiritual guru, he toured all over India. In 1893, he decided to represent Hinduism in the World Parliament of Religions, as we all know, at Chicago. Here, his powerful speeches, seeped with the wisdom of ancient India's Vedanta philosophy, electrified audiences. He also visited and addressed audiences about Hinduism in England. Here, there is a blue plaque in central London to commemorate Swami's stay in London. We can see it. But today, Anirban Roy plays Swami Vivekananda. Trained at the London School of Dramatic Arts, Anirban is an up-and-coming drama artist. He has played many roles ranging from Romeo to Macbeth to Oedipus. He is also a co-founder of Breaking Television and DocuWorld Film Festival. Anirban Roy, welcome as Swami Vivekananda.
Sisters and brothers, I thank you in the name of the most ancient order of monks in the world. I thank you in the name of the mother of religions, and I thank you in the name of millions and millions of Hindu people of all classes and sects. I am proud to belong to a religion which has taught the world both tolerance and universal acceptance. We believe not only in universal toleration, but we accept all religions as true. I am proud to belong to a nation which has sheltered the persecuted and the refugees of all religions and nations of the earth. I am proud to tell you that we have gathered in our bosom the purest remnant of the Israelites who came to southern India and took refuge with us the very year their holy temple was shattered to pieces by Roman tyranny. I am proud to belong to a religion which has sheltered and is still fostering the remnant of the grand Zoroastrian nation. I will quote to you the wonderful doctrine preached in the Gita. Whosoever comes to me, through whatsoever form, I reach him. All men are struggling through paths which in the end lead to me. But sectarianism, bigotry, and its horrible descendant, fanaticism, have long possessed this beautiful earth. They have filled the earth with violence, drenched it often and often with human blood, destroyed civilization, and sent whole nations into despair. Had it not been for these horrible demons, human society would be far more advanced than it is now. But the time is come, and I fervently hope that the church bells that tolled this Sunday morning may be the death knell of all fanaticism, of all persecutions with the sword or with the pen, and of all uncharitable feelings between persons winding their way to the same goal. But why do we keep on clashing? Much has been said of the common ground of religious unity. I am not going to just now venture my own theory. But if anyone here hopes that this unity will come by the triumph of any one of the religions and the destruction of the others, to him I say, brother, yours is an impossible hope. Do I wish that the Christian would become a Hindu? God forbid. Do I wish that the Hindu or Buddhist would become a Christian? God forbid. The seed is put in the ground. The earth, the air, and water are placed around it. Does the seed become the earth or the air or the water? No, it becomes a plant. It develops after the law of its own growth, assimilates the air, the earth, and the water, converts them into plant substance, and grows into a plant. Similar is the case with religion. The Christian is not to become a Hindu or a Buddhist, nor a Hindu or a Buddhist to become a Christian. But each must assimilate the spirit of the others and yet preserve his individuality and grow according to the laws of its own growth. Let me repeat that holiness, purity, and charity are not the exclusive possessions of any church in the world, and that every system has produced men and women of the most exalted character. In the face of this evidence, if anybody dreams of the exclusive survival of his own religion and the destruction of others, I pity him from the bottom of my heart and point out to him that upon the banner of every religion will soon be written, in spite of resistance, help and not fight, assimilation and not destruction, harmony and peace, not dissension. Let us embrace it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anirban, for that moving performance of Swami Vivekananda. We wish you all the best for your career. I also request most of you who are in the Zoom, if you can keep your video on to become a part of the audience. People would like to see your nice faces. So now, from the sublime heights of truth and philosophical thought, let us turn our gaze to the dazzling world of earthly success, fame, and fortune. Let's meet now the Indian Rothschild, Sir Albert Abdullah Sassoon. For this to happen, we must turn to Shivkant Sharma. Shiv has been an old friend and a colleague and an editor, BBC Hindi radio in London for many, many years. He is a well-known journalist, a political commentator, columnist, and also a Sanskrit scholar and a teacher. Let us hear Shivji to unravel the success story of Sir Albert Abdullah Sassoon. Shivkant Sharma.
Hello, I am Sir Albert Abdullah Sassoon. I was born into an affluent Jewish business family of Baghdad in 1818. Where do I start? When we got the monopoly of Britain's evil opium trade, our family business was even more rich than the businesses of Lakshmi Mittal, the Bagaris, the Swaraj Pol put together. I was featured in Vanity Fair in mid-August 1879. Yeah, that's what it was. This speaks a lot about the importance enjoyed by me and my family. But when I was about 10, in 1828, my father, David Sassoon, almost lost his life due to political turmoil in Baghdad. But being a good planner and a shrewd businessman, he fled with me and rest of our immediate family and settled, guess where? In Bombay, in Western India. Bombay was then becoming the commercial capital of India under the British East India Company. Here, my father established his new family business, David Sassoon and Company. He gave me and my brothers sound knowledge of Jewish traditions. We also picked up practical business skills. We were assisted by not anyone else, some Mumbaiya Baghdadi Jews who, like us, had migrated to Bombay. In the 19th century, we built business bases in Far East. Our ships had the monopoly of carrying tons of opium to China. It's an old story now. So let me tell you how we helped the wily British in their wicked sale of opium. It was our company that assisted the British to force the Chinese emperor to buy opium that turned hundreds of Chinese into miserable opium addicts. It was our shipment of opium to China that turned the balance of trade in Britain's favor. Our monopoly over opium trade was the most lucrative part of our family business. By fattening on Britain's obnoxious opium trade with China, we became multimillionaires. Today, I sometimes spot articles and websites condemning the Sassoons and calling our trade evil. But my descendants are still rich and powerful and influential. Well, another item that helped to fatten us was cotton. From his business base in UK in the mid-1800s, one of my brothers shipped endless bales of raw cotton from India to Britain to feed British cotton mills at Lancashire and Manchester. We also carried cotton cloth manufactured in Britain to India. This ruined thousands of Indian cotton weavers and impoverished India that had given us refuge. But we weren't bothered by the misery we caused because it benefited our family business immensely. After my father's death, I became the chairman of the family business. Like my father, I added grand buildings to Bombay and Pune that enhanced the Sassoon reputation as philanthropists and public figures. Some of the most prominent are, as you well know, Pune's Sassoon Hospital, Bombay's Sassoon Library, and the Prince of Wales's polished bronze equestrian statue. It's been removed now, but the place this statue once stood proudly is still called, you guess it, Kala Ghoda. In 1873, when I was over 50, my wife and I moved to London. We fitted seamlessly into the life in Britain. My brothers, Reuben and Albert, were already there. I bought a grand mansion at 25 Kensington Gore and added to its grandeur. It's a listed building today. I also purchased residences in Brighton and Scotland. My Vanity Fair caricature of 1879 was captioned, "The Indian Rothschild." It was complimentary and had tickled my pride. But within a few years, my family was directly linked with the wealthy Rothschild family. This happened, I think, in 1887, when my son Edward Albert Sassoon married Elaine Caroline de Rothschild in a grand wedding ceremony in Paris. In 1889, I looked after an important British guest, the Shah of Persia. I hosted a lavish reception for him in London's Empire Theatre. Of course, this won the Shah's heart. He awarded me the Order of the Lion and the Sun. In 1890, Queen Victoria rewarded me by raising me to the position of baronet. I felt that I must respond appropriately to the high status we had gained in Britain. I asked London's Herald's College to create a coat of arms for our family. They created a coat of arms for the Sassoons with suitable symbols. It had the Lion of Judah carrying the inseparable rod, a palm tree to symbolize the success of a righteous man, and a pomegranate, a Jewish symbol of good deeds. But like all mortals, my time ran out. On 24 October 1896, I was buried in a mausoleum I had built behind my Brighton home. Later, my coffin and that of my son Edward were reburied in London's Willesden Jewish Cemetery in Brent. And that was it.
Wow, thank you. Thank you very much, Shivji. I am amazed how you got your accent in just 3-4 days. So now you're not only a newsman and a writer and a broadcaster, but also a great actor. Thank you. So from late 19th century, let's plunge briefly to early 20th century London and meet Lady Hayashi of Japan. It seems that being an Asian woman was an automatic disqualification from entering the pages of Vanity Fair. Today, let's hear Lady or Countess Hayashi's story and her life in London from no other than Akari Mochizuki, a famous London-based singer from Japan and a trained actress. Akari Mochizuki has given numerous performances and has a huge following. Let's welcome Akari. Akari.
皆さん、こんにちは。I am Countess Misao Hayashi. When I was born in Japan in 1858, my name was Misao Gamo. In 1875, when I turned 17, I became the wife of Tadasu Hayashi, who started serving as Japan's residence minister in Britain from 1905. From 1905 to 1906, he was the first Japanese ambassador to the court of St. James. This happened when the Japanese legation was upgraded to an embassy. Both my husband and I adjusted well to life in London. We actively participated in London's social life. We were quite popular, for we were featured on Ogden's Guinea gold cigarette cars. I was also photographed in 1902 by Lafayette at Bond Street in Western court dress. But we remained Japanese at heart, and our home in London's Grosvenor Gardens clearly reflected this. Commenting on our love for our homeland, a popular magazine, The Ladies' Realm, wrote, "In addition to the comfortable modern furniture, there are several kinds of Japanese cabinet filled with carved netsukes and objets d'art of all kinds, fine specimens of Japanese embroidery, carving, and lacquerwork. A striking feature in the room was a wonderfully realistic picture of Fuji, Japan's famous mountain, which upon close inspection is discerned to be not a painting at all, but an exquisite production of needlework on velvet, a masterpiece of industry and artistic feeling." We also had a special Japanese corner in our lives. On one evening of every week, my husband used to entertain his staff. He would call a few Japanese friends to a genuine Japanese dinner, cooked and served in as it would be in the land of the chrysanthemum, Japan. To this native banquet, no English guests were ever invited. I also had my typical native or Japanese entertainment. This used to take the form of a tea party. I would organize this at intervals, and it was confined to a limited circle of Japanese ladies living in London. Indian tea taken in the barbarous fashion with milk and sugar was tabooed. So real Japanese tea in tiny porcelain cups, pale and fragrant, without milk or sugar, would be served to my Japanese guests. I would also add dainty Japanese sweetmeats and dishes. To this party came the wives of the members of Japanese legation and their daughters and one or two others. But there were rarely more than a dozen Japanese ladies than living in London. So my native entertainment was done on a very small scale, but was much appreciated. Usagi oishi ka no yama, kobu no tsuri shika no kawa, yume wa ima mo megurite, 忘れがたきふるさと. I was often mentioned in the British newspapers. They wrote about my enjoyment of needlework. British newspapers expressed surprise that I was a grandmother for our young granddaughter, Sono Fukuzawa, lived with us. Another matter that they widely reported was when I proposed that women should learn jujutsu, a special form of Japanese martial arts. My husband was featured in Vanity Fair on 24th of February 1902. But like other women from Asia and Africa, no matter how well known they are, I was excluded from it.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Akari. That was such a beautiful and moving presentation and such a moving song, I think full of nostalgia and longing for one's place of birth. Thank you very much and all the best for your career.
Thank you.
Next, we must step back a few years and immediately attend to His Royal Highness Maharaja Duleep Singh from the Kingdom of the Punjab, the land of 5 rivers. Who doesn't know this handsome prince? But today, young Suyash Shukla from Jabalpur, Madhya Pradesh, will come and tell us more. An honors graduate from Bangalore with a wide range of interests from astronomy and music to Indian history and culture. Please see and hear him turn into Maharaja Duleep Singh from Suyash Shukla. Welcome to you, Suyash.
My connection might be tragic, but it's not as tragic as the story of my life. Shashriyakar, I am Maharaja Duleep Singh, son of the Lion of the Punjab, Maharaja Ranjit Singh. When father died soon after my birth in 1839, my shrewd mother, Maharani Chimnabai II, was determined to make sure that I succeeded to his kingdom. But alas, the Sikhs were defeated by the British East India Company in 2 wars. In 1848, when I was just 10, Lord Dalhousie annexed the Punjab. They hated my mother's tenacity and her rebellious spirit, and to clip her wings, they separated us and imprisoned her in Chunar Fort near Banaras. But my fearless mother tricked them. Disguised as a maid servant, she escaped and found refuge in the Kingdom of Nepal. After dethroning me in 1849, Dr. Logan, a Christian cleric and a famous surgeon, and his wife, Lady Logan, became my guardians. Removed from my people and my culture, I converted to Christianity when I was 15. And soon, I was packed off to England. My displacement reminds me of the tragic 8-year-old Ethiopian prince, Alam Yehu. Like me, he was ruthlessly moved to England after his father killed himself when his army was defeated by the British at Magdala. Now, let me turn to the famous Kohinoor. You must have heard that I voluntarily surrendered this diamond to the British in India as my present to Queen Victoria. But this is a fairy tale. As I told Lady Logan in the Buckingham Palace, I was but a child, a mere infant, when forced to surrender this diamond by a treaty. And moreover, even if I had gifted it away, was it ethical of the British in India or of Queen Victoria to accept such a priceless gift from me, a mere boy of 10? And in England, Queen Victoria cooed in her diary about my striking good looks and adopted me as her godson. I was placed in the London Scaledge Hotel and then moved from place to place until finally lodged with Lord and Lady Logan in Scotland. Separated from my people, my culture, my kingdom, and my Sikh faith, I turned into a Victorian Englishman. And it wasn't until 15 years later that my British masters finally permitted me to meet my mother at Calcutta. But by now, she had become old, weak, and almost fully blind. I brought her back to London, and she opened my eyes to my royal background and my Sikh faith. Sadly, she died in 1863. As cremation was then illegal in Britain, her body was placed in the Dissenters' Chapel in London. After about a year, I was allowed to take it for cremation to Nasik. On my way back, I married Bamba Mullah in Egypt. We settled in Elvedon Hall in Suffolk, and I led the life of a country gentleman. I decorated my mansion in Indian style and constructed many new buildings in the area. We became famous for our social gatherings and our hunting parties. We had children, and Queen Victoria was the godmother to my eldest boy. Let me tell you something interesting. When Mansur Ali Khan, the Nawab of Bihar, Bengal, and Orissa, was in Britain, we jointly created an Oriental group to meet with interested Englishmen to discuss India's culture and history. But by the 1880s, I was in financial trouble. I wanted the British to raise my income. This was mentioned in Vanity Fair when it featured me on 18th November 1882. Their caricaturist, spy, or Leslie Ward, showed me dressed as an Englishman smoking a pipe. And I don't blame him. He was only depicting how my years in Britain had changed me from a slim, handsome young Sikh prince into a squat and rotund middle-aged man with a balding head and a big paunch. In the 1880s, I clashed with the British. I demanded compensation for cheating me out of my ancestral property in India. I felt I had erred by staying from my roots, and I was determined to return to my kingdom, to reclaim my lost heritage, and to embrace Sikhism. But the wily British never ceased to astonish me. They stopped me midway in Aden and forced me to abandon my plans. After my wife died, I decided to move to Paris. I remarried, but led a frugal life until my death in 1893. The British then rushed my body to England for burial according to Christian rites. Today, my mortal remains lay next to my wife. But some British Sikhs want to carry them to India. Many Indians also insist that the British should return our Kohinoor to us. But both these aims seem difficult to achieve. Why? Because the British are hard nuts to crack. They are generally unwilling to surrender what they believe is theirs. And especially if it is something as precious as the Kohinoor, the mountain of light. And remember, in 1868, they looted the treasures and invaluable illuminated manuscripts from Ethiopia. I hear some of these had to be purchased back from British museums so that they are returned to Ethiopia. Anyway, let's see what the future holds.
Thanks, Suyash, for being such a regal and convincing Duleep Singh. It's now time to turn from royalty to Rabindranath Tagore. Known for his poetry, novels, plays, and his soulful Rabindra Sangeet, he was a true polymath. He hailed from Bengal, but today our Rabindranath Tagore will be talking to us in Hindi from Almora, the hills of Uttarakhand. A highly renowned Kumauni poet.
नमस्कार, मैं रविन्द्रनाथ टैगोर हूँ। ब्रिटेन के साथ हमारे परिवार के संबंध मेरे दादा राजकुमार प्रिंस द्वारकानाथ टैगोर के समय से रहे हैं। मेरे दादा ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी के लिए काम करते थे, जो बाद में जाकर शिपिंग मैग्नेट बने। अगस्त 1846 में लंदन प्रवास के दौरान एक होटल में उनकी मृत्यु हो गई और उन्हें लंदन में कैंसिल ग्रीन के एक कब्रिस्तान में दफनाया गया, क्योंकि उस समय ब्रिटेन में मृतकों को जलाने की इजाज़त नहीं थी। सन 1878 में अपनी जवानी के दौरान मैं पहली बार इंग्लैंड आया। मैंने यूनिवर्सिटी कॉलेज लंदन में कई कक्षाएं अटेंड की, पर बगैर कोई डिग्री लिए स्वदेश लौट गया। ब्रिटेन के प्रसिद्ध चित्रकार विलियम रॉदेस्टाइन 1910 में भारत आए। भारत की संस्कृति, कला और सभ्यता के प्रति उनके भीतर अपार अनुराग और आदर था। उन्होंने मेरी कुछ कहानियाँ और कविताएं पढ़ी जो कि उन्हें बहुत पसंद आई। उन्होंने लंदन में रह रहे महारानी के कूच बिहार के कुछ मित्रों प्रमोदलाल सेन और मित्र ब्रजेंद्रनाथ शील से कहकर मुझे लंदन आमंत्रित किया। मैं 1912 में लंदन आया। रॉदेस्टाइन और मैं अच्छे दोस्त बन गए। उन्होंने मेरा परिचय उस समय के लंदन के संभ्रांत साहित्यिक और कला प्रेमियों के प्रति समर्पित महानुभावों से करवाया। इनमें प्रमुख थे स्टोपफोर्ड ब्रूक, इजरा फोंड, H.G. वेल्स, W.B. मैट और वर्नार्ड शॉ जैसे साहित्यकार। लेखक जॉर्ज कोल्ड्रोन ने मेरी कहानी अराकान की महारानी का नाट्य रूपांतर किया, जिसका मंचन लंदन के मशहूर अल्बर्ट हॉल में किया गया। एक बार मेरे लंदन प्रवास के दौरान मेरी गीतांजलि की एकमात्र प्रतिलिपि लंदन अंडरग्राउंड में छूट गई। मैं भाग्यशाली था कि कुछ समय बाद वह मुझे लंदन अंडरग्राउंड में खोए हुए सामान के कक्ष से मिल गई। विलियम रॉदेस्टाइन चाहते थे कि ऑक्सफोर्ड विश्वविद्यालय मुझे मानद उपाधि दे, पर उस समय के भारत के भूतपूर्व वाइसराय लॉर्ड कर्जन ने कह दिया, भारत में इसके हकदार मुझसे बेहतर कई और हैं। इसी वर्ष मैकमिलन लंदन ने मेरी गीतांजलि प्रकाशित की, जो कि मेरी आध्यात्मिक बंगला कविताओं का एक संकलन है। सन 1912 में जब मुझे यह समाचार मिला कि मेरी गीतांजलि को साहित्य का नोबेल पुरस्कार मिला है, उस समय मैं अमेरिका में था। मुझे यह पुरस्कार मिलने से विलियम रॉदेस्टाइन बहुत प्रसन्न तो हुए, साथ ही उन्हें यह अफसोस भी हुआ कि मेरी रचनाओं को पहले ब्रिटेन ने नहीं बल्कि स्वीडन ने मान्यता दी। इस तरह सन 1912 में मैं अंतर्राष्ट्रीय विभूति बन गया, नोबेल पुरस्कार जीतने वाला भारत का पहला नागरिक। आप सोच रहे होंगे कि ब्रितानी पत्रिका वेनिटी फेयर ने मुझे जगह दी कि नहीं। भूल जाइए, कुछ ऐसा नहीं हुआ। वेनिटी फेयर की निगाह तो जाती थी राजनीतिज्ञों, राजाओं, महाराजाओं, महारानियों, साम्राज्यवादियों और पश्चिम के राजनेताओं पर। आप ही सोचिए मैं इनके पन्नों में कैसे जगह पा सकता था।
Thank you, Tribhuwan ji. Thank you very much. So after Bengali poet Tagore, I now invite Kusum Pant Joshi to play another poet, this time a female, who wrote in the English language, the well-known Sarojini Naidu. Kusum Joshi.
I'm Sarojini Naidu. Mr. Gandhi called me Bharat Kokila or Nightingale of India, not because I was a great singer like M.S. Subbulakshmi, who I had the privilege to introduce in her classic film Meera in the 1940s. He called me India's Nightingale because of the lyrical quality of my English poems. By the way, I nicknamed Mr. Gandhi as Mickey Mouse because he had big ears. But that's another story. Before my marriage to the man of my choice, I was Sarojini Chattopadhyay. My father, Aghornath Chattopadhyay, was a Bengali Brahmin. He was a thinker, an educationist, and a social reformer. In the 1800s, social customs barred many of us Indians from foreign travel. But he crossed the seas to study chemistry at Edinburgh University and became the first Indian to receive a DSc degree from there. After returning home, he set up the Nizam's College at Hyderabad in the Deccan. One of my brothers, Virendranath, or Chatto, became a militant revolutionary. He wanted to end the British Raj. He was a precursor of Subhash Chandra Bose. I say so because by trying to take help from Germany against the British during the First World War, my brother Virendranath did exactly what Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose tried to do some years later during World War II. My other brother, Harindranath Chattopadhyay, was like me, a poet. Harindranath also shone in many Hindi films. Do you remember the eccentric old man obsessed with old clocks in a famous Hindi film, Sahib Bibi aur Ghulam? That wizened man in the old mansion was my brother Harindranath. I had another film connection. No, not me. It was my younger sister, Sunalini Devi. She acted in Bombay Talkies Films, a film company set up by Himanshu Rai, who wanted people from respectable families to join films in the 1930s and the 1940s. Another sister of mine, Suhasini, was the first female member of the Communist Party of India. She too was a poet a singer, and a dancer. But let me return to myself. My father wanted me to become a scientist or a mathematician, but I loved poetry. When the Nizam or ruler of Hyderabad read one of my poems, he was so impressed, he awarded me a scholarship. So in 1895, aged just 16, I sailed to England to study at London's King's College and Girton College in Cambridge. Looking back, I think most Britishers understood very little about India then. That reminds me of an outrageous statement made by an Englishman in the year 1910. Do you know who he was? He was not an ignorant Englishman. Oh no, he was Sir George Birdwood, a very senior civil servant. Born in India, he had also lived and served there for decades. But what did Sir Birdwood say? During a meeting in London's Royal Society of Arts on 4th February 1910, he declared, "I have up to the present, and through an experience of 78 years, found no examples in India of fine art." Then, turning to a typical Indian representation of Buddha, he had added, "This is nothing more than an uninspired brazen image, vacuously squinting down its nose to its thumbs, knees, and toes. A boiled suet pudding would serve equally well as a symbol of passionless purity and serenity of soul." It was this dismissive comment that had pushed artist William Rothenstein and 12 other eminent and fair-minded Britishers to protest in the columns of the London Times against Sir Birdwood's flawed description, and also to set up the India Society to correct such distorted views of India. But let me not harp on negative perceptions alone. Luckily, during my 3-year stay in the 1890s, I met many well-meaning English people. Elizabeth Adelaide Manning, Secretary of the National Indian Association, became my guardian. I began to correspond with British poet Arthur Symonds. Symonds also published my poem in his magazine. My literary circle widened. It included members of the Rhymers Club, with such people like W.B. Yeats, who became an admirer of Rabindranath Tagore in later years. I also met other British writers and poets. Some of them became my mentors. They advised me to write on Indian themes and also to use imagery that reflected India, its life, and its people. Many of them also made much of me. I remember being mentioned in many British newspaper articles. I became even better known when my first collection of English poems, The Golden Threshold, was published from London in 1905, after I had returned to India. In 1912, I visited England again with my book, The Bird of Time. It was then that it appeared. In his introduction, poet Edmund Gosse wrote that being already known in the literary world, I actually didn't need any introduction. A long interview I had given appeared in London's Westminster Gazette in 1913. The next year, I was made a Fellow of the Royal Society of Literature. I read many of my poems at London's Criterion Hotel, and Mickey Mouse, I mean Mr. Gandhi, was also in the audience. But I was from India, a mere British colony, and I was a woman to boot. So I was invisible and of no consequence to Vanity Fair and its readers. So be it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that inspired performance, Kusumji.
Thank you.
So I also welcome, meanwhile, I can see on Zoom, I welcome Professor Martin Schofield, who has just joined our Zoom. I think maybe earlier he was there. So I must thank all these people who are coming to our program. I can see Syed Haider Abbas Mirza from Pakistan. He has joined from on the Facebook. He is, of course, he also comes from the same family of Mansur Ali Khan. He is a cousin of Lynn Ains, if I'm right. And also our friend cultural, a person who does so many programs. Zafar Bakht is watching from Allahabad. So you are all welcome. And we are very flattered that you are watching our program. So it's now time to turn our gaze on Maharaja Sayaji Rao III, the powerful man of modern princely state of Baroda in Gujarat. And who else to perform it? Our friend Dr. Hilal Farid as Maharaja Sayaji Rao. A highly regarded orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Hilal Farid, is also an Urdu poet known in the community for his professionalism and kindness. When I had broken my leg, he took extra care of me as an orthopedic surgeon. So, Dr. Hilal Farid, over to you for how you play Maharaja Sayaji Rao.
Thank you. I am Sayaji Rao III of Baroda. I made my kingdom the most progressive and modern princely state of India. That's why the British used to flash me before the world to steal all the credit of my glorious work. Let me tell you my fairy tale. Just like Cinderella's godmother touched her with a magic wand and transferred her into a beautiful princess, Baroda's Maharani Chimnabai picked me, a simple villager of 12, and turned me into a royal prince and heir to the throne of Baroda. This happened in 1875. The British, like God Almighty, were then known as the paramount power. They used the tiniest excuse to jump in and take control of princely states. This was exactly what happened in Baroda. When its ruler died, the British declared his successor to be incompetent. They set up a regency council headed by Maharani Chimnabai, who adopted me as her son and the future king. But it was the British resident who had real control. An English tutor, Mr. Eliot, took charge of my education. He made sure I was given Indian learning and was also introduced to what was taught in English public schools. I ascended the throne in 1881. After my marriage to a South Indian princess from Tanjore, I ushered in a new age in Baroda. I attacked social evils like untouchability and child marriage. I made education compulsory and promoted the Sanskrit language. I developed agriculture, textiles, and other industries. Many roads and railway lines were constructed. I actively patronized Rajput painting and veteran artists like Raja Ravi Verma and Jamini Roy. My most lavish new building was Baroda's Lakshmi Vilas Palace, which you can see in the background. I also established the Bank of Baroda and Baroda College, where I set up a Gyan Shala. It was headed by Ustad Maula Bakhsh, an expert in both North and South Indian classical music. In 1916, Ustad Maula Bakhsh helped Pandit Vishnu Narayan Bhatkhande to organize the first All India Music Conference. Many Indian princes were notorious for harems full of women. One even rumored to have 365 wives. But I practiced monogamy and believed in the emancipation of women. After my first wife died, I married Chimnabai II. We had 3 sons and a daughter. But Chimnabai was not just a wife and a mother who spent her life hidden behind the parda. She traveled, advocated women's rights, wrote a book on the position of Indians, and was the first president of the All India Women's Conference in 1927. My wife and I often visited Britain and Europe with our children. My son was a student at Oxford. Like many other Indian Maharajas, I also owned properties in Britain. One of them was Poet Laureate Tennyson's residence, Aldworth House, that I purchased from his son, Hallam. Though I wasn't disloyal to the British, I was not a sycophant or a slave. I remember having once upset them because they felt I hadn't followed their rules of etiquette during the darbar or audience with the British. I was also a patriot and a nationalist. Dadabhai Nauroji, the first London MP of Indian origin, was one of my ministers. I sponsored the higher education of Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar, a bright young Indian scholar. Similarly, I employed two promising Western educated youngsters whom I had met in London. They were Aurobindo Ghosh and Satyarata Mukherjee. All these young Indians went on to leave a permanent mark in the annals of Indian history. In 1931, during the Round Table Conference in London, I decided to sponsor a grand program of Indian classical dances by Satyarata Mukherjee's ex-wife, Leela Sokhe. It was intended by famous people at the newly furbished Dorchester Hotel. I loved fashionable Western attire and ordered clothes from Henry Poole and Company in London's fashionable Savile Row. But when Vanity Fair featured me in January 1901, I was shown wearing a traditional silken angarkha and Indian-style trousers with a Maratha turban on my head. The artist also depicted me flashing my Baroda diamonds, one of the most famous pieces in my fabled collection of jewelry. My biography in Vanity Fair was a cocktail of facts and jibes. It acknowledged my knowledge of English and some qualities, but the sting was at the tail of the biography, where they made flippant remarks. They called me a very absentee prince and a very unpunctual man. Finally, to get a kick out of highlighting my rustic background, Vanity Fair gave a translation of my title of Gaikwad as cow keeper. In 1935, I celebrated my diamond jubilee. Having completed my innings with distinction, I left the world in 1939 at the age of 75. This was my story. Thank you for listening.
What an inspired performance, Hilalji. Lovely.
Thank
so,
you.
Thank
Sorry,
you very much.
at one place, this thing stopped working. There was some confusion in the middle.
Not to worry. It's only Zoom, not war. So we are now holding on. I'm very happy to tell you that we are holding on to the audience. Nobody is leaving. That speaks a lot about our actors like Shiv Kant, Mamta, and Hilal Farid, and Atul Tiwari. So most of the journey we have done, but the little which has left is equally tempting and important. So don't leave. So now, following on the hot footsteps of Maharaji Sayaji Rao, we now turn to his wife, who is being played by Uttara Sukanya Joshi as his beautiful and progressive queen, Maharani Chimnabai II of Baroda. Well, Uttara is a Kathak dancer and a singer trained in classical and light music. When she isn't busy working for the Civil Service Office of National Statistics, She engages in diverse artistic activities, sometimes too many, including music, performances, creative writing, sketching, and community work. Let's see how she performs today. Over to you, Uttara.
Born as Princess Gajrabai of Devas in Maharashtra, I became Maharani Chimnabai II when I married Maharaja Sayaji Rao III of Baroda. I was a helpmate of my husband in modernizing our kingdom. I worked for the emancipation of women. I set up institutions for female education and encouraged them by awarding scholarships. In 1911, my book titled The Position of Women in Indian Life that I wrote with Mr. Siddha Mohana Mitra, editor of the Deccan Post, was published from London. In it, we highlighted why plans for female emancipation tended to fail. That is, women were unable to liberate themselves and take advantage of schemes for reform. I also brought up my only daughter, Princess Indira Raje, in a free atmosphere in Baroda's fabulously exquisite Lakshmi Vilas Palace. As a child, she accompanied us and her brothers on our many foreign trips. She was one of the first Indian princesses to attend school and college. She grew into a beautiful, charming, and intelligent young woman. Indeed, she grew so fiercely independent. Let me tell you a story to illustrate this. In 1911, when aged about 18, she met and fell in love with the handsome Prince Jitendra Narayan of Cooch Behar. She decided to reject her arranged marriage to the powerful Maharaja Madho Rao Scindia of Gwalior. Actually, I don't blame her. He was already married and was about 20 years her senior. But what really shocked her father and I was when she openly wrote a letter to inform him of her decision to break their engagement. This defied norms of how royal women were expected to behave. It was unheard of. Quite the embarrassing scandal for our family. He was furious. He wrote to her father to express his consternation. Later, she traveled all the way to London to marry her Prince Charming in 1913 in a civil ceremony and a Brahmo-style wedding in a London hotel. This news was flashed all over London in newspapers. She was very happy, of course, but her father, the Maharaja, wasn't. He strongly disapproved of the wedding. Though he finally gave his consent, he really was averse to it till the bitter end. So no one from our family, not even I, could attend the wedding. By the way, my granddaughter, Maharani Gayatri Devi, counted among the world's most beautiful women, was in fact Indira Raje's daughter. Moving on to the subject of Vanity Fair. Vanity Fair featured my husband in 1901 and later ceased to exist in 1914. Granted, this was long before I became president of the first All India Women's Conference in 1927. Still, I used to visit England and Europe throughout the heyday of Vanity Fair. Also, I moved in British social circles and had achieved quite a lot. Despite this, as with so many other outstanding women from Africa and Asia, they turned a blind eye towards me. I don't care. It was their loss, not mine.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that great performance, Uttara. That was really appreciated. So now we go ahead and catch up with the rest of the wonderful performances coming up. And now it's who it is, right? Now we go to, from Gujarat, we go to Punjab to meet and greet Maharaja Rajinder Singh of Patiala. You know, the descendant is Amrinder Singh, who has till recently, the Chief Minister of Punjab, and who has changed sides now. But let's go to Maharaja Rajinder Singh, and it is being played by a young, talented Sonal Vedi. Sonal, over to you.
Greetings. I am Rajinder Singh, son of Maharaja Mohinder Singh of Patiala in the Punjab. When I was only 4, I succeeded my father to the throne in 1876. The British in India managed me and my state during my minority. As they wanted to expose Indian princes to Western ideas, I was first educated in India and then studied independently in Cambridge. After becoming the Maharaja, I modernized the administration. Due to my reforms, I was described as the first reigning prince to blend the elements of the English gentleman and the Indian potentate. Like my ancestors, I was loyal to the British and I fought their wars against their enemies. In recognition of my services, Queen Victoria gave me a GCSI. Anyone here remember what that even means? Maybe not today, let me tell you. I was a Knight Grand Commander of the Order of the Star of India in 1898. In addition, I loved horse riding and I was a keen sportsman. That reminds me, when the beautiful and famous Arab horse owned by Lord Roberts passed away in June 1899, I sent him an Arab charger as a gift. In addition, I enjoyed pig sticking, hunting. I excelled at polo and cricket. I enjoyed playing field hockey, English billiards. The list goes on. I also promoted the game of cricket in Patiala. Indian cricket legend Ranjit Sinhji, who we've heard from today. It's nice to see you again today, brother. He became a good friend of mine. The British, in general, were fine with me. However, I stirred up trouble by falling in love with Florence Gertrude Bryan, the young daughter of my Irish stable master. The British did not like the idea and they opposed it. But I went ahead and I made her one of my queens. She embraced Sikhism and was renamed Maharani Harnam Kaur, and she became one of my wives. Sadly, she died aged just 23 and left me shattered. Another Irish connection I had was Thomas O'Brien Butler. He was a famous Irish musician who, after visiting India, dedicated a song to me. It was titled, My Little Red Colleen. And of course, I must not forget to tell you about my caricature and article in London's Vanity Fair on 4th January 1900. Many who were caricatured there felt honored, but I don't know why they made me look like a real clown. Instead of projecting me like the agile sportsman and imposing Maharaja that I was, they made me look like a stick insect. Let me tell you more. Today I'm wearing glasses, but while I was alive, I did not. And yet a pair of spectacles with a round frame was put on my thin face and a massive turban placed on top of my head, kept in place with a band going over my face, around the back of my head. Sometimes I feel like laughing at this ridiculous image of myself. At first, I thought the caricaturist was a man because it was signed MR, which is how Mr. is written. However, it turned out MR stood for Mary Catherine Rees. Mary Catherine Rees, a female artist. I survived just about 10 months after I was covered by Vanity Fair, and I left this world the same year in November. I was not even 30. My young son, Bhupinder Singh, succeeded me. He became famous in the UK as a sportsman and a lavish spender. You must visit the Indian Gymkhana Club that he helped to set up in Austerley in 1916. One of my descendants, Amarendra Singh, was until recently the CM of Punjab and is still a famous Indian politician. I could go on and on and on, but I think I should stop now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sonal, for that wonderful and very, very inspired performance. And I also admire equally your stunning backdrop, wonderful backdrop. How I must ask you, where did you get it from?
Actually borrowing it from an aunt.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for your input. So we now go to another excluded figure of the past, Maharani Suniti Devi of Cooch Behar. We are very pleased to announce that the family of Cooch Behar are here, who have joined the Zoom today. So I welcome Diana and Vanessa, and also thank you very much for all your support and cooperation throughout this project for the last 1.5 years. So Maharani Suniti Devi today is no one else than young, talented Garima Shukla from Madhya Pradesh. An extremely bright student, Garima has a master's degree in political science. She has many interests and has also given talk in AIR. So welcome to the show, Garima. Over to you, Garima.
Hello, I'm Suniti Devi. Would you like to travel back in time with me? Welcome to 1864, when I was born as the daughter of Keshav Chandra Singh, the celebrated Hindu social and religious reformer of the Brahmo Samaj. My father had liberal views, interested in female education in the 1800s. Simultaneously, something else was happening. The British government, then ruling India, sought to train the ideal ruler for the state of Cooch Behar. But for its plans to succeed, it was crucial that the Maharaja marry an equally advanced girl. For the Britishers were no strangers to the fact that the Maharaja's marriage would make or mar their experiment. They therefore chose me as the befitting bride for the young debonair and heir to the throne of Cooch Behar. I was just 14 when I got married. My husband, the handsome young prince, Rabindranath Tagore, was only 16. Because I was below the legal marriageable age, we did not live together for the initial 2 years of our marriage. I continued living in my paternal home, while my husband sailed away to London immediately after our marriage. When he came back home in 1880, we had a ceremony. He was also crowned as the Maharaja of Cooch Behar, and I became the Maharani. How do you think should good rulers be? Anyway, it was our innate desire to work for our people. So we worked assiduously to modernize our people and to promote their welfare. The cause that touched us was female education. To realize it, we set up the Suniti College in 1881, where girl students were exempted from paying fees. I also munificently arranged for palace cars to ferry girl students from home to college and back. With my sister Sucharu Devi, the Maharani of Mayurbhanj, I founded the Maharani Girls' School in the hill station of Darjeeling. In 1932, I served as the first president of the All Bengal Women's Union. This organization worked tirelessly to help our victimized fellow women. Coming to our children, we had 4 sons and 3 daughters. All my sons were packed off at a nascent age to study in Britain. I used to visit London frequently with my husband. I met Queen Victoria and was awarded a CIE, a Companion of the Order of the Indian Empire, in 1887. I became the first Indian woman to receive this honor. I was also invited to the Diamond Jubilee celebrations of Queen Victoria and attended it without any veil or parda. Being modern is one thing, but being uprooted from your culture is totally another. What do you think? So, even though I was familiar with Western-based clothes, I felt unhappy when I thought of my sons. In my English book, The Autobiography of an Indian Princess, I wrote how unfortunate it was that all my sons were sent away to Britain at a very young age. And I felt saddened to think that by departing from their motherland, they had also lost the opportunity to learn their mother tongue and our wonderful ancient language, Sanskrit. I was over the moon when my husband, Maharaja Rabindranath Tagore, was featured in Vanity Fair a day after Christmas on 26 December 1901. But what was startling was that the magazine never focused on non-European women, and even prominent women from various parts of the globe were excluded. In 1911, my husband and I went to the English coastal resort of Bexhill-on-Sea. He was there to recover from an illness, but sadly, he failed to recover and died there in September 1911. His funeral ceremony was a grand but tragic affair. His body was then brought to London and cremated in the Golders Green Cemetery, where there is an image to commemorate him. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how strait the gate, or how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul. So let's all be invictus, unconquerable.
Thank you very much, Your Royal Highness Garima Shukla, Suniti Devi. I really admire you for taking a full view of your personality. So you are the only one who has done that. So congratulations for a beautiful performance. All the best to you. I must mention, you're welcome, Garima. I must mention and thank a third family member from the family of Kuch Bihar, Sara Kovi, who is also here along with Dana and Vanessa. We have just 2 performances left, and they are equally important. After that, we will be able to take 1 or 2 comments from all of you. So in conclusion, we take a leap from Asia to the so-called dark continent of Africa. Let's welcome Emperor Menelik II of Ethiopia. It is Rupak Asthana, a marine engineer and presently working in London as a surveyor for British engineering, who has taken up this new role of Emperor Menelik this afternoon. Rupak Asthana.
Hello, everyone. I'm Emperor Menelik II of Abyssinia. You may now know it as Ethiopia. My country was one of the rare exceptions to escape being snatched or conquered by the colonial powers of Europe during the so-called partition of Africa. I'd just like to add that to look and feel good, they claim to be carrying the white man's burden and were on a civilizing mission and saving souls. In reality, they were just being selfish and greedy by taking over Africa. Let me come back to my story. In July 1897, when I was featured in Vanity Fair, it had just been about 9 months before this, in 1896, when it was my army which had broken the back of the Italian forces in the famous Battle of Adwa. Vanity Fair must also decide to focus on me because I had received a British diplomatic mission led by Renal Rod to my capital city, Addis Ababa. Now, my picture in Vanity Fair by Glick was clearly a caricature. I was over 6 feet tall and looked stately and imposing. But Count Glick shrunk me into a diminutive figure. He showed me in a squatting position, looking like some cute and cuddly child, smiling sweetly with my white teeth shining between my parted lips, with my ears poking out from both sides of my round head. I looked like a little imp. It looked nothing like the rugged, manly, and warlike emperor that I really was. But I must admit that Vanity Fair's description of me as the most powerful of Ethiopian princes and an enlightened monarch full of humanity, clear-headed and sensible, whom his subjects love, was accurate. Vanity Fair also wrote of my hardworking nature, awareness of scientific developments, and my victory over Italy. I have had a very colorful life. From the age of 10 in 1855, I was brought up by Theodros II. He was the emperor of Ethiopia at the time. Unfortunately, Theodros II clashed with the British in 1868. The British retaliated by shipping elephants and a powerful fighting force from India under Robert Napier. Magdala, Theodoros's capital, was attacked and his forces were defeated. Shocked by these developments, Theodros shot himself dead. The British behaved abominably. They shipped Theodoros's minor son, Prince Alemeyu, to England, where he died in his teens. Before leaving, the British plundered Theodoros's treasures. The loot they carried away from my country included priceless gold artifacts and hundreds of illuminated manuscripts. When my cousin, Ras Makonnen, attended the coronation of King Edward VII in 1902, he was moved to tears upon being shown the beautiful Abyssinian manuscript, now owned by Lady Mew, an American connoisseur of art in London. Lady Mew wrote in her will that the manuscripts she possessed should be returned to Ethiopia, but the London Times campaigned against her. Eventually, while most were returned, some of her treasures are still in the UK. After Theodoros's death in 1868, I returned to Sheva, was recognized as the ruler of Sheva, and in 1889 became the Emperor of Abyssinia. In 1909, I suffered a stroke and passed away in 1913. Today, you may find my mortal remains buried in a marble mausoleum in a monastery by Addis Ababa. Thank you.
Wow, wonderful, wonderful, Rupak. You don't look like an Indian anymore. Congratulations. So please prepare to welcome our last personality today, Queen Taytu and wife of Emperor Menelik II, and also the wife of Rupak Asthana in real life. She was featured on magazine covers, but not in Vanity Fair. So that's why she has come here, maybe to protest. Let us hear the Queen speak for herself. Welcome, Alka. Asthana, we know you are an Odissi dancer and a thinker and a London-based business consultant. But today, we would like to imagine you are Queen Taytu Betul, Empress of Abyssinia of Ethiopia. Over to you, Alka.
I am Queen Taytu, Empress of Ethiopia. Vanity Fair excluded me. I, however, find it amusing that in their biography about my husband, Menelik II, they had the cheek of making rude personal remarks by calling me Lady of Much Physical Weight. I would have complained to Queen Victoria about this had I met her, but we never visited England, though my husband and I sent Queen Victoria our recorded phonographic message in 1899, after Her Majesty had sent us her recorded message in 1898. You can still hear our voices if you search the internet or the British Library. The year of my birth is disputed. It was either 1840 or 1851, whatever it might be. I became the third wife of Emperor Menelik II. I was a very rare African woman to have learned to read and write. Pardon me for bragging, but I must have been very clever. I picked up diplomacy, politics, and economics. Besides Amharic, I also know Ge'ez, a rare language linked to Ethiopia's Orthodox Christian faith. Today, historians acknowledge that my husband used to consult me when he took important decisions. They also agree that I had strong influence in Ethiopia's historic attack and glorious victory in the Battle of Adwa against Italy in 1896. This battle later inspired a worldwide movement of Pan-Africanism in the early 20th century. I took over the administration of the country after my husband's health started declining after a stroke in 1901. My rise to power annoyed my rivals who removed me from power. Menelik and I had no children, but one of Menelik's daughter by an earlier wife invited me to live with her. Gradually, my power started fading. I finally exited the world in 1917. My mortal remains were buried besides my husband in Addis Ababa, the capital city that I had helped to build. Thank you.
Wow, that was wonderful, Alka. Brilliant. And I love your backdrop as well. It's a fantastic backdrop. And you also stood up and you performed in full view like Garima. So many congratulations. It's difficult to say who was better, you or Rupak. So I don't want any argument between you. So I will be a bit diplomatic and say both were equally excellent. Both were equally good. So that brings us to a close of our performances. But before we go, we would love to have limited comments. And I would request those who make comment to be brief. And then lastly, I would request our chair, SACF, John Eade, to offer a vote of thanks. I think first I must go and invite a comment from any one member of the family of Cooch Behar who are here, Sarah, Vanessa, or Diana.
Diana here. I'd like to thank you very much. I thoroughly enjoyed it all. And I think you've done a fantastic pageant.
Thank you.
I'd just like to add it's 2 years since Diana and I were in Cooch Behar for the first time, where we explored a lot about our great-grandmother Suniti. We learned a lot about her. We were very inspired by her as a character. And thank you very much. Thank you very much for involving us in this.
No, it was equally great, and a lot of help and assistance and ideas we took from you. So we were supported and helped by everyone, and that's why we have been able to end up with this wonderful project. Thank you very much. So I might now invite, because I saw Chad wanted to ask something to, I think, Lynn. And Chad has been an old friend and she's a filmmaker. So I would only request Chad to be brief, and please go ahead with your whatever you want to comment, Chad.
Well, my question is addressed to possibly Sarah, Diana, as well as in Lynn, that how connected do you now feel to your lineage, and considering the British behavior and attitude towards them, even though being Indian royals, because I have finished writing a screenplay about Duleep Singh, and Duleep Singh's pension, as Lynn had mentioned, was curtailed and given to Lena Logan. And, you know, those other things happened. So what is your view about it?
Would you like to answer that, Diana?
We
did learn a lot while we were there, didn't we?
We learned a great deal while we were there. And I think it was very difficult. Let me look at this through the eyes of my grandmother, who was in England, had grown up with the two cultures. And I think not only did they feel outsiders, perhaps in the UK, but were not that welcome back home with the transfer of the pensions into Privy Purse and things. So it actually wasn't just the British. If visiting Calcutta was interesting for us because the British had helped the Maharaja and Suniti introduce many reforms in Calcutta, which are much valued still today, emphasis on education and those sorts of things. So, but the Vanity Fair project's been very interested in asking ourselves, why is it that the Cooch Behar family works so hard to be accepted into British society? And that is a question I don't know the answer to.
So do you mean when we're visiting Cooch Behar rather than
looking at
visiting Calcutta?
No, looking at and a lot of the people in this pageant, the stories indicate how hard our family worked to get on with the British and to fit into British society. But working through this project, I've always had the sense they were never part of British society. They were always on the outside. And so my question is, why did they try so hard to be part of Queen Victoria's court, for example? I share a story of visiting Osborne House in the Isle of Wight, where there is a picture of both our great-grandmother and great-grandfather up in the Durbar Hall. And the Durbar Hall was being decorated at the time, but the guide showed us round and described the pictures on the wall of Queen Victoria's conquered peoples. And that felt incredibly uncomfortable.
But I think in answer to your question, how strongly do we feel connected to our background? Very strongly indeed, because we grew up with Indian traditions with our mother and grandmother. We all have a family name, so we do feel very strongly connected, and particularly after a trip to Cooch Behar, to be there, to be in the palace where our grandmother grew up, to learn about our great-grandparents, to see what Nipendra achieved in the city and the infrastructure. We were met with great warmth in Cooch Behar. So no, we feel our lineage very, very strongly. But yes, Diana's right, it is curious, but we do know that, I think it's accepted that the marriage of Nipendra and Suniti was a British experiment, if you like, to bring two cultured and educated youngsters together. But some sadness comes through. You mentioned, is it Garima? Is that how I say it correctly? You know, the sorrow of sending the children to the boys, particularly to the UK. So there were, yes.
Because, for instance, Maharaja Duleep Singh married a stagehand, mullah, you know, who he met in Egypt. Or I think Mansur Ali Khan married a chambermaid. At that time, even though Indian royals were royal, the British royal didn't want any liaison of that kind with them.
Absolutely.
That's a great comment. Thank you very much, Diana and Sarah. And Chand, I suppose you would like to hear Lynn also as an answer to your question. So can I request Lynn also to have her say, please?
I'll try and answer quite briefly. Just to say, I grew up in Australia, and when I was a child, there was actually a White Australia immigration policy, and Indians were not supposed to have been in Australia. So it was something of a kind of secret, and we didn't talk about our family lineage very much at all. I was aware that my grandfather was Indian. So it was only after I left Australia in my 20s that I began to feel free to actually explore that connection, and that I began to want to do so. And when I finally did get to India in 1991, I felt a great sense of liberation, I suppose, because that secret connection was something I could now acknowledge and begin to feel proud of. And I suppose, in a way, I feel that I have benefited from feeling part of a much larger world than just Australia or just England and America. And so in that sense, I truly value that connection. And my relatives, both in Murshidabad and Pakistan, have been extremely welcoming and warm, and that has made me feel very good.
Well, thank you. Thank you to you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chand, for your nice question and comment, and also Sarah and Diana and Lynn for your input. And I would wonder if anybody else wants to ask a question. If Mr. Yawar Abbas is there, I would very much welcome any comment if he wants to make. I can't see him there. And if he's not there, anybody else, we can take at least one or two comments, and then we can go to John to close this event. John, yes, please.
No, just to say that there's lots of reference to the book. Have I? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, yeah, no, I just wanted to deconstruct the notion of the British, because the British are extremely diverse, just as Indians are diverse. There was a certain kind of British colonial project going on, but that was criticized by radicals and others who thought that the whole development of imperialism was crazy for a whole variety of reasons, cultural, social, economic. So, you know, I think we have to be a bit more nuanced when we're talking about the British.
That's really pertinent. I take that and I accept what you're saying. So if there is no one else making a comment, then we can go again to John to please offer a vote of thanks and conclude this program. Before that, I would really thank each and every person who has acted today, right from Anirban to Shivkant, Mamta. I cannot take all the names. It is really, the event became such an event only because of the people who acted and also the people who participated and encouraged and liked and loved. So I would like to see if there is any hand raised, or else we request John to conclude. And I think people are in a mood to conclude.
Tea time.
Okay, John. So over to you for the final words.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for inviting me. It was a fantastic afternoon, which combined, you know, passionate involvement, a real interest in history, but also people's personal interpretation, because history is not dry facts, it's also how we interpret it. And of course, history changes. The way we see the past now is not the same as the Victorians did and those in the 18th century. So congratulations, everyone. Congratulations really to pulling off the project. I think the Heritage Lottery Fund, which after all is paying for this through everyone's gambling in Britain. We are the benefit with the beneficiaries of this wonderful Heritage Lottery gambling outfit. But I mean, to produce what you've done in the webinars, the documentary film, the book, meeting Lynn and engaging her and her project, today's pageant, and the recordings and the linkages really between Britain and India and other countries is so impressive. So, and of course, also linking with the volunteers and their commitment. And to do it during the pandemic, which of course changed the timetable and made it even more difficult. So that's tremendous achievement, I think. And I could say much more, but the more I was thinking about this, the more I realized how the two great world wars transformed everything. You know, and because after the First World War, Britain was basically bust, and the Second World War finished it off. So without those two great world wars, we probably wouldn't be meeting here now, and we'd still be subjects of the Queen. Thank you.